Sure. Bow with me. Lord Jesus, we thank you for just a blessing of another day. God, a day to wake up and be directed by you. God, we pray for our meeting today that you're in our hearts, you're in our mind, and in our decision making, that we are doing this for the best of your kingdom. We pray for the safety of all of our first responders and all of our county employees. We pray all these things in your son's name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, we'll go ahead and call Marshall County Fiscal Court to order, November 19th, 2019. We'll go ahead with guests. I see Russ Litzinger sitting back here. How's it going, Russ? And Ted Otis is here. We're going to update the court on the judicial building and what's been done for the past several months. Brad, do you want to?
Yeah.
And we'll have at some point Russ and Ted step up and give us their comments on how they participated in this.
Sure. So I guess it was back last year, 2018, we were told of probably some water infiltration into the judicial building and some of the judges' offices. So we went and started inspecting some of those areas and found some mold inside of some drywall. So at that point, our biggest concern was the employees and the health concern that there was there for the mold. So we had Otis come out and do a air quality test and actually compared that to one that was done by Summit in 2012 and noted, mold was present, but we found that it wasn't a health hazard for employees. So from there, we procured some engineering services with Markham Engineering, and they came in and did a kind of analysis of the building, and there were several things that was identified through that analysis and some steps that have been taken that I'd like Russ to talk about, kind of where we started and where we are now. I also wanted Mr. Otis to kind of go through the air quality report so that you all understand what it was, what they found, and what they suggested. One thing why we're bringing this obviously to you all is because this has a budgetary effect, and we've overspent already on our maintenance line items. Some of those expenses are going to be reimbursed. The AOC reimburses about 80% because that's what their occupancy of the building is on some of those non-recurring charges. So the mold remediation, the engineering services, some of the things that we did with the air balancing of the building, those are all reimbursed at 80% of those. But moving forward, I think it's prudent for you all to understand the what's been done from day one since we knew about the issues at the judicial building and how far we've gone from there till today. So, Judge, I don't know if you wanted to get into that letter that we received.
Until we hear back from them.
Sure.
I'd say
So
update them at the next court meeting.
Yep. So Russ Litzinger with Markham Engineering. If you come up here and just kind of give us just a high-level overview. Russ is a smart guy.
Dumb it down for us.
Yeah, he's a smart
Russ
guy.
has a tendency to get way up here.
Well,
And that's a compliment, Russ.
well, and I appreciate that. Thank you for your confidence, by the way, and I appreciate the opportunity to address the court. So just very briefly, we got engaged at the end of February of this year to come in and evaluate the facility and did a fairly high-level evaluation of things, looking at some of the common themes that tend to lead toward mold proliferation in buildings, at least in our experience. And so a couple of things that we observed in February is we noted that the building was operating at a net negative, meaning we were exhausting more air out of the building than we were supplying in terms of ventilation to replace it, about to the tune of 3,000 CFM to the negative thereabouts. And we noticed that the detention center also was negative to the judicial center, meaning the jail was pulling air, tending to pull air out of the judicial building as well. We noted that the ERV unit, so the main unit up on the roof that supplies ventilation air to the building, had filters that were heavily loaded, and as a result of that, helped to contribute to this negative issue. And then more fundamentally, that unit had a design basis that allowed it to be capable of producing air that wasn't of an appropriate quality when we get into very high, very humid conditions. We noticed significant rainwater intrusion into the basement, particularly in the area that's referred to as evidence storage, and it appeared that that water was coming in through two 4-inch primary communications conduits serving the communication need for the facility. And then we noticed some miscellaneous hydronic and condensate leaks. That's the piping that serves the individual terminal units throughout the building. That was not very significant, though, more tangential. We notice also that the building where it has brick veneer or CMU veneer, that there are weeps and vents provided. Weeps being a hole near the bottom of the brick assembly that allows accumulated moisture to drain out, and then vents near the top that allow that drainage plan to appropriately dry. We noticed that those had all been sealed off as a rule, and so that was curious to us. We noticed that there were quite a few, what I'm just going to generally classify as voids and discontinuities in the envelope. So things that would be evident to most people is if you look at where we have window glazing that's installed in a wall envelope, where the glazing has a rubber seal that seals around the window for moisture protection. Some of that sealing had become delaminated. Where we had points of corners where we've got a Lucabond joined together. Some of those seams, due to age and time, had some differential settling and had opened up. So that was a bit of a concern. And then we also noticed with the digital control system that controls the overall HVAC system, there were some communication issues at play. So based on all of that, we made basically 5 big recommendations. The first was to resolve the rainwater intrusion issue down in the basement, and Gary and his guys have done yeoman's work with that. There's been a lot of investigation done, some digging. We've worked with AT&T and the various suppliers. I think we all feel confident at this point that we've got that issue successfully addressed. So that's a good point that we've made, I think. Regarding hydronic and condensate leaks, this continues to be a bit of a sore subject, I think, and where we're at right now is looking to make sure that the units themselves, the ductwork that they serve, are appropriately cleaned by a NADCA certified contractor. Following that result, we'll look back at this condensate leak issue to make sure that those two are successfully addressed. We noted we needed to correct this building pressure issue that I've described, this volumetric offset. And so we did a ventilation analysis back in May in which we revised the ventilation delivery requirements for the building to meet current code. And then we had contractors report to the site to make those adjustments. And when we did so, we also took into account the amount of air that the detention center was pulling off of the judicial building, so that the judicial building itself can continue to operate at a net volumetric positive. In other words, if I might speak with some vernacular, all buildings leak. That's a reality. So the choice is, do we want the building to leak in or do we want it to leak out? And we always want to choose a small amount of outward leakage because we can control that to some extent. So we've got that successfully addressed. So that's a good thing. We noted to resolve some controls issues, and a part of that, the court elected to go above and beyond, and I think it was prudent in that we addressed the controls issues related to just age of the system. We also went in and installed active humidity sensing at every floor within the building and also at the ventilation unit that's in place currently. So now we have a system in place that will generate an alarm anytime the humidity level at any floor or any of the courtrooms rises above an appropriate range. We're going to get an immediate alarm to advise us of that issue. So I think that's a big help. Big picture, that ventilation air unit up on the roof still is probably not the best fit for the application. So we've noted that, and again, it's not something we have to do on an emergency basis, but as soon as it's prudent, it's going to be advisable to replace that unit with a unit that provides active cooling. And so that's sort of a long-range goal, I think, for the project itself. Regarding envelope issues, we have largely, again, Gary's guys have done great work, have largely opened up all the vents and the weeps on the exterior envelope as per the architect's recommendations. So that's going to help dry out that building envelope assembly, which should help a great deal in mitigating the potential for mold proliferation again. And then they've also, I think, largely completed their efforts to seal up all the evident cracks and voids and discontinuities on the exterior of the building. So we're making great progress. Following that, we've, Mr. Jeff Steen came through. He is Assistant Director of Emergency Management at Murray State, and he made 2 additional recommendations above and beyond what we offered, both of which I think could only help. Just offer them here. He noted we should add some dehumidifiers to those spaces downstairs. I think that's prudent. He also noted that he recommended cleaning all the ductwork, the coils, and the air terminals. And when I'm describing air terminals, I'm talking about the grills up in the ceiling, such as this device as an example. Is getting rid of all organic materials that are contained within those systems themselves. And as I understand it, Brad is working on preparing a proposal request to get that work secured. So that's a pretty brief overview of where we're at to date, but I certainly want to open the floor if anybody has any questions.
I've got a couple. What were you referring to exactly? You made a comment about the filters heavily loaded.
Sure, good question. There is a single ventilation air unit up on the roof, and the way this unit works, it does not have any mechanical cooling in it. It has what's called an enthalpy wheel. It's a big segmented wheel that comes about waist high, and this wheel bisects 2 airstreams. One airstream is air that's being brought into the building by way of a fan. That's the ventilation air that's coming into the building, while we are simultaneously have another airstream that's pulling air out of the building, and these 2 airstreams cross. And the interface for where those 2 airstreams cross is this wheel. And the idea here is that, like when we take the season we're in now in heating mode, I'm trying to take excess energy out of the air that I'm exhausting and introduce it back into the airstream that I'm bringing into the building, this idea of energy recovery. That unit has multiple series of filters in it. Not only disposable filters on either side of this wheel, but it also has 2 what are classified as permanent filters. They're metal mesh filters. And I think it's just an honest reality that it was unknown due to the age of the building that those filters were there. And so I think it's just indeterminate as to when they might have ever been changed or checked or cleaned.
Gotcha.
But it was significant. When those filters were removed, it represented about the difference of about 2,500 CFM. So basically, those filters, that single action was causing a 2,500 CFM differential in the amount of air that I was able to move with that unit.
You're saying that unit, right, is basically at end of life, or?
It's near end of life. If we went by ASHRAE guidelines, that's the standard society that sort of kind of guides our industry. So that unit is near end of life from that standpoint. It also, because it does not have mechanical cooling at its basis, it is difficult for that unit to produce air of an appropriate quality when we get into some of these, hot, humid days that we get into in midsummer.
So the next unit needs that?
That would be our recommendation, absolutely. Absolutely.
I just have one more question. The humidity alarms that you referred to, is that permanently installed, or is that some of your equipment just
They're
used?
permanently installed,
Okay.
and what we did, just so you know, so there were thermostats installed throughout the facility for each of the various thermostatic zones. We have replaced those thermostats with new thermostats that have the humidity sensing component in them. So if you go over to the building, you can kind of get a sense of where those are at just by seeing a newer vintage thermostat on the wall. And what we tried to do is strategically place one at each of the 4 corners of the building at each level. and then also install one in each of the courtroom spaces. And then we also provided a permanent humidity sensing component in the outside air machine, in this ventilation air machine. And the idea is if that air quality that's coming out of that unit ever gets out of bounds, we're going to alarm and we're going to shut the unit off, so as to be proactive about, preventing such an occurrence from happening again.
Thank you.
Sure.
Since you've undertaken these remedial measures, have you been able to do any testing to see if the mold level has been affected by these?
And I think I might let Brad speak to this.
Yeah, I think, so far we've done 4 total air quality tests. One was done in 2012, as I said, Summit did that one. That's when the exterior an application was put on for basically a vapor barrier on the outside of the split block. Since then, we did one in August of 18. That was the first one that we wanted to determine, make sure that there was no health hazard. Before they did the mold remediation in the offices, we did like a baseline again. I believe that was in the beginning of October. And then immediately after the mold remediation, about the mid-October timeframe, we did another air quality test. Those tests were only done in the offices that we did mold remediation. And Mr. Otis, if you could speak to maybe the first initial air quality test you did, and then the ones preceding those. Sure, yeah.
Initially, we were called in and because there was visible mold, down in the basement, and we had some issues. I mean, you could even see it coming through the drywall seams in Judge Mattingly and Judge Telly's office. So we had IMAC come out and, cut Judge Telly's office apart and cut some holes in some walls. And one of the issues, and everything you're saying may correct this problem, but you could visibly or physically feel the walls just weeping between the exterior brick and the backside of the drywall. I mean, there was no vapor barrier or anything like that ever installed. But initially, we had, samples that were, like the storage was extremely high down in the basement where he was talking about the water intrusion. You could see visible mold, growing up the wall. So, I mean, it was high. But for the most part, it wasn't near as bad as I thought. We didn't have any stachybotrys or anything like that. Now, each person is more, prone or not prone to be allergic or have issues with mold. I mean, it's all symptomatic. I mean, my wife's got asthma and took allergy shots her whole life, so it'd probably bother her more than it would. It doesn't bother me. But we done remediation, and we've cut basically the levels in Judge Telly's and the Commonwealth Attorney, and cut them in half, after remediation. Stephen called me. Stephen Alexander, he's the one that done the remediation and encapsulation, and asked me, what I thought, and I said, I don't know that we're going to get any better considering the condition of the entire building. I mean, we've cut it way down. I mean, it's still obvious we've got some water intrusion because of the Aspergillus and Penicillius, spore counts, but we're a fraction of where we started at. So, I don't know until we get some of the other items completely corrected that we're going to be able to get a whole lot better. Because, our outside spore count the last time was over 100,000. And, people, sometimes don't really understand that, you can't get every spore out of the building because every time you open the door and close the door, we've got landscape, we've got leaves, we've got ragweed, we've got pollen, we have, so you can't completely get it out, but when you look at it as a whole, I mean, the water intrusion is a representation of the, Penicillius and Aspergillus and some of the cladosporium. But I mean, we've come a long way. I mean, we have come a long way. I mean, if we can't figure out a way to get the building from weeping inside the walls, I know you were talking about some of those things have been closed off, but I mean, it's going to keep being a reoccurring event if we can't figure out a way to keep the walls from weeping from interior, on the inside between the exterior brick. So.
And I know that was when this first came to our attention, we were made aware of the 2012 air sample test, and I guess then the mold was identified, and so they tested, and the plan was to bring in M&M out of Paducah, and they put a coating on the exterior of the wall, and that pretty much was it. What we wanted to do is, that's why we brought in the engineers. We wanted to find out what is causing the water coming into the facility, because I agree, if you don't find the source of the problem, and we may never find the source of the problem, but if you don't find the source of the problem, you're not going to get rid of, the mold.
Well, when I was over there with, I think it was last August, when we cut the walls apart, and we had Dennis Smith with Pinnacle over there. And he and I, either one, I mean, I've been around construction since '84. And, of course, he's, the man. And just never seen anything quite like that building. I mean, there's no vapor barrier, there's no insulation. I mean, it's concrete exterior, a stud, and drywall. I mean, so, the heat against the exterior walls, I mean, it creates a condensation problem. Now, I mean, he may figure out how to make that work, but I've never seen anything like that. I've never seen, anything constructed exactly like it. Now, I'm the mold guy, okay, but I'm just saying when, Dennis and I and Rob were standing around there looking at it, I mean, I've never seen anything. I've never really seen anything like that when we cut the wall out. I mean, it's just brick. But anyway, I mean, we've come a long way. I think all the things he said about the HVAC, because, I mean, we had some of the drip pans in there and stuff were weeping into the ceiling tile, and we had mold issues and, on the tiles and things like that. And one of the other biggest thing was on the evidence room versus the storage room coming in from the dock. One side is climatically controlled and the other side is not, and there's no insulation in that wall, and that's why the mold is growing all the way to the ceiling. But I mean, all that can be corrected. I'm just not sure, how much they can do, to keep the interior walls from weeping on the back side. I mean, like I say, I've never seen anything like that, but at this point, unless you're very sensitive to mold, I don't see that being a health issue for the building. I don't. I mean, like I say, we've cut Judge Telly's by more than half, and the Commonwealth Attorney's Office and other things like that with air scrubbers and the encapsulation that Stephen done and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, we've come a long way. It's just, how much more can we do to continue to control what's going on in there? Because I don't see it getting better if we don't do some engineering measures to continue to make it better. So anyway, any more questions for me?
Ted, you'd referred to 100,000 level outside.
Yeah.
What's acceptable inside?
Well, there's really what you want to see, Kevin, is normally a 3-to-1 ratio. I mean, if you've got 10,000 outside, you'd want to see less than 3,000 inside. But the species and the genus is more important than the actual count. HVAC system should, filter and, the air and, with all that, and it should, make the inside lower than the outside. It's just a matter of what species. As an example, like in the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, our Aspergillus penicillius reading was 1,600. And our outside control sample was 156. So even though the spore count was higher outside, much higher than it was inside, it's the Aspergillus penicillius, those spores are indicative of water intrusion. So, I mean, we had some issues at another building, but I mean, it was landscape. I mean, if you've got, landscape and plants and dirt, I mean, you're going to get mold off of it, period. But it's the type of mold. And so, I mean, it still shows me that even though we've cut probably levels by half or 2/3, we still have water intrusion. We still have some mold issues within the building. Now, I mean, I had a building that I run, and the first run through was 20-something thousand, and which is, almost 10 times, over 10 times what this is. But, some people wouldn't necessarily be allergic or something to that. It would be, someone that was, maybe had respiratory issues, stuff like that. I mean, like I say, I've been in buildings where, the mold was, 3 inches long, growing off the walls. And, but it's indicative of the person as how much allergenic reception that they have to that. But by and large, I mean, it's obvious, and we all know that we do have some mold issues in there with water. Is it really bad? No, it's not near what I thought it would be with my first run through the building. I mean, it wouldn't bother me for my daughter to be in there. So, I'll say that. And like I say, I mean, there may be somebody in there that's really sensitive, and maybe it could bother them. But by and large, I mean, we've probably cut the mold probably in half over there with the air scrubbers and things like that, filtering and stuff like that. But like I say, we've had to do something, because over time it's not going to get better by itself.
The ductwork cleaning, do you feel, will that lessen those numbers also?
I think so. I mean, I really do. I mean, because, I mean, the air circulates through the building, so, I mean, it's got to be within the HVAC system. But, yeah, I mean, that's definitely, going to be a benefit. But first thing, we need to eliminate the water intrusion.
Right.
I mean, if you don't eliminate the source, it's going to be hard to have a corrective measure long term. And all things he talked about is only going to help.
There are actual, and you may have seen this throughout your career, but there are actual facilities that really don't fix the source.
Yeah.
And they just routinely, say, clean the ductwork, or they routinely take out the problem, the visible problem, but they don't fix the source.
Right.
And to me, the problem with that is you get into a continuous financial obligation. And by the end of the time, when you add up the amount of monies that you're spending on just, cosmetically fixing the problem, or, not going to the source, to me, it's better to find the source and fix it. And I don't know if Russ, if you want to comment on this, but, when the due diligence, and that's one of the things that we had discussed, is to go back all the way to the beginning with the design and how that the engineering that was done on the land, the due diligence then, the high counts of water that was identified in the actual ground, how the building was built, and it may be, and I'm not an engineer, but it may be, in my opinion, just stepping back and looking at this at the bigger picture, it's going to be a problem that's maybe not going to go away. So, for the fiscal court, and Russ, if you want to speak on that as far as the design and everything, so that they understand, how it's designed, because we've got the two, I know we had folks that were down there as employees that they'd see the elevator shaft filling up with water, thinking that there was a problem, when actually we've got two pumps in the elevator shaft to pump out the water that comes into the elevator shaft. So can you just explain to them, when it was reviewed as far as the design, how the actual facility is designed and
To your point, so I think it's safe to say that that area has a fairly high water table based on its elevation relative to everything else, and it appears that that was anticipated during the original design effort. So the building has a rather extensive foundation drainage system underneath it that feeds into a sump that collects that water and then pumps it out as a routine matter, of course. To my knowledge, I've never heard of systemic issues with that system performing its function, but obviously we're relying upon a mechanical system to help keep the water at bay surrounding the basement itself. So that always is less than ideal. I mean, it's why our forefathers built courthouses up on the high point, Just, you didn't have those mechanical backstops to support you back in those days. So we are both the benefit and the victim of technology sometimes. Regarding mold proliferation, I'll just speak to that briefly. So the current body of knowledge, and it's extensive, based on mold events and the study thereof over the past couple generations, basically says that mold proliferation requires three things. It requires the appropriate environment, it requires food, it requires media on which to grow. And current research would suggest that before you see mold proliferation, in other words, before I can go down in the evidence storage room and see mold growing on the wall, I've had to have had at least 30 days of localized relative humidity on that source above 80%. So basically, it represents not a snapshot as much as it represents a more foundational issue at play that ultimately culminates in visible mold proliferation. So when we're diagnostically trying to evaluate mold proliferation and why are we there, we always go back to those three fundamentals, and we're trying to remove those fundamentals from the equation. So just as anecdotes, but as an kind of to underscore this point, when you deal with a wet surface, why is that surface wet? Well, it's wet for any number of reasons, but in our case, two things are known. We had water infiltration into the evidence storage area, so it was allowing that envelope to get wet and stay wet. We also had a building that's operating at a negative, and as you guys can appreciate, I think, when you have a building that's operating at a negative, so I'm requiring more exhaust than I am replacing with makeup air, where does that air come from? Right, it comes from the exterior, and it comes through any crack it can find its way in. Okay, and the air outside, is, especially as compared to our conditioned environment, is not appropriate, and it is highly charged with moisture, particularly in our summer conditions. And so that moisture, then, we create a moisture drive situation. I'm basically encouraging that moisture to come in the building when I'm operating at a negative. So that's why we start as a point of order of addressing those sort of fundamental issues. Regarding the issue of food, that's where we get into the duct cleaning piece. That if I remove all the media with which mold can grow, if it can't attach and adhere, it becomes difficult for it then to reproduce. So where we're heading with all this is we're trying to get down to that root source, to Judge Neal's point, is keep attacking those fundamentals, knowing that we're doing the best we can based on current science and knowledge of the subject to get to the root cause of the issue. Did that?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And then the cost, if you want to just update the court on the cost, the potential cost, and moving forward on that.
Yeah, so as you all know, we have, again, 80% of the operating costs from the prior year that they reimburse for this year. So we're basically operating a year behind because they'll take a look at our expenses. So this next year will probably go up because our expenses have gone up. But regardless, we have about a $30,000 line item that we were just spending in maintenance, and we're about $30,000 over that right now. Again, some of those are reimbursable, so we're going to get some of that back, but some of it we're not. I mean, some of it we're just going to have to eat. I will say, the ductwork cleaning, I just prepared that RFP yesterday, and I have some people over looking it over, and we're going to submit it to the accredited companies that do that ductwork cleaning. But it's not only the ductwork, but it's also the registers that you see all the way up into the air box and the coils on each unit. So I think that's gonna contribute to a significant increase in air quality. But also, so that will be something that the AOC will reimburse their 80% of. They did say that they would provide 100% reimbursement of an employee to go down there for 20 hours a week. So they've basically given us the go-ahead to hire a county employee that they will reimburse 100% of to be there 20 hours a week. Because I know the maintenance crew spends a lot of time down there, and one of the things that we've learned is automated building concepts that came in and did a training on the unit, the computer system that works the temperature control of the building. It almost needs to be looked at daily to make sure that there aren't any of those alarms, that we don't have anything red flag coming up. And this would allow that person to come in, make sure that everything's running smoothly, and if there's any changes in scheduling. So one of the things that we're working on with Judge Jameson is a schedule of the building, so we can set a weekly schedule so they know when we have occupied space and non-occupied space, so we know when we need to heat or cool each space. And if that schedule changes, this person can go into the computer system and change that schedule. So those are going to be some things that we're looking at initially, and I think, but this next thing is the duct work cleaning and getting that taken care of.
What about the second part? He had mentioned in that particular piece, two things, the dehumidifiers as well.
Yes,
Is
yep.
that part of that bid?
Yeah, no, that's
No.
going to have to be something that we look and see. Yeah, I'll have to get with somebody to recommend some dehumidifiers, but that would be the space that is not conditioned down in the basement, that where the evidence was. There's no unit down there, so the suggestion was either control that with a split unit with that would heat and cool the space, or put a dehumidifier in it that would automatically drain out to a drain and pull the humidity out. And I think we decided that just for efficiency, we're not gonna have any personnel in that space. And I even talked to Tim Reynolds and Sheriff McGuire about their evidence room, and I don't believe any of that stuff is going back in that building or in that room. So it would be really janitorial supplies and other storage. So I think we can get by with just a dehumidifier.
What about the long-term, or maybe not that long-term, based on what Russ said, but
Yeah.
that unit?
The unit was $100,000?
Yeah, I think
I figured it was large.
I think a number was just thrown out there for 100,000, but I do believe that with with the filters that we changed, with the rebalancing, with the humidity, all the things that we've done, I'd really like to see how the unit functions that it was normally designed or typically designed to do before we get into that. Because I think that I don't even, though I believe those ERVs, they don't even make them without the mechanical mechanism anymore, do they? I mean, they're,
You could buy them like that.
Okay.
Definitely, they would not recommend they be utilized in that particular application.
so at the point of the building being built, that was what was applicable
At
to
that
it.
time, when it was built.
Yeah, but I think that some things that will help that whole issue, and then we'll just have to approach that next year.
That building was built '02.
'02.
I mean, I would assume a new unit, what's the life, what's the cycle on if we were to buy one?
Yeah, it's a
20
very cool piece of equipment, so they would say about 20 years.
We're right there.
It's nearing its end line anyway.
Yeah.
I say so, yes.
But I think talking to
Okay.
Jeff Steen, as Russ had mentioned, he went through the building at no cost. He just said, hey, I'll take a look at it, fresh set of eyes, and He was impressed by the things that we have done since we've identified the issues. So I think he thinks that we've made some positive movement. But one of the things that he definitely stressed was that air duct cleaning. And he said basically getting those units and the air duct back to original working order. When you do that, he believes that, again, some significant positive change could occur.
Well, one thing I didn't mention when I first got involved, they were, the computer system was set up, they were shutting the units down on Friday night, so by the time Monday got there, I mean, it was in the 80s and no telling how much humidity in the building. So that definitely, I don't know if you knew that or not, but contributed to some of the issues also.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying, but I think that the more accurate communication of that is the building went into non-occupancy status. It doesn't necessarily shut it off completely, because that's what people say, oh, it didn't run all weekend. Well, that's not accurate. It's running, it's just not running at an occupancy. And I can't get into the weeds of it, but when you talk to the automated building concept people, they'll explain to you why you do you set it to occupancy and non-occupancy throughout the week. Even from a courtroom, a room this size would be functioning at when we're not having court or when they're not having court down there, it'd go into non-occupancy. So the humidity and the temperature would kind of stay at a certain range until we schedule it to come on and heat or cool that space while people were in there. The building down there was, the units that were put in were designed if the building was at full capacity all the time. Well, obviously that's not the case. And in fact, probably is never at full occupancy. So when you try to run the building at full occupancy, as they kind of described it, that's where you kind of start to get into some issues. So I think what we've done is addressed a lot of those and with the computer system, and I think we're probably at a better spot today than we were. Well, shoot, when was that when we met with the ABC guy? That's the first time we ever saw the computer system run. We didn't know what it did. So, I mean, that whole time we didn't, when the building was kind of taken over by the maintenance crew, we didn't know how it functioned. So it wasn't until then we really knew what that system did and what it was designed to do. So.
When ALC commits to that 20 hours at 100%, what type of commitment is that? An annual, is that looked at on an annual basis where they could next year say, you're in a better position,
Sure.
we're not committing to that? So
Yeah.
it's just going to be part of their annual contract that we get to us, right?
Every year they'll come in
So
and do it.
will that particular part start on the new contract then in 2020, or?
I think it would
What's
be
the-
I would say it'd be immediate.
immediate.
Yeah,
They were
because
pretty
of the
adamant.
issue.
They were
Yeah.
pretty adamant about getting that started. Now every year they'll do an audit of our expenses, and they just did it for last year, and so they'll base our reimbursement based on the previous year's expenses. That'll be they're adamant about they want that 20-hour person now. So they'll look at that, and what I plan to do is I want something. I've got some emails back and forth that's stating that they will do that, but I want that in writing to where they put it on their letterhead, and so we know, and how that process is. Do we put an invoice into them every month after we pay them, or, what's that process? So I'll get all those outlined before we actually start to move forward with hiring that person.
Okay.
And I think it's important to understand, because a lot of folks don't understand. They just see the judicial building, they think it's our responsibility for everything. ALC occupies about 80% of the employees in the facility. So the relationship is between the county, the fiscal court, and ALC. ALC has a policy. We actually follow the policy. They have a representative, and then that representative communicates with our representative. We've identified Brad as the county's representative. And the reason why that is because as we work together on that 80-20% relationship, we want to make sure that they're informed as far as what we're doing, and then they have that line of communication to us. Now, I will say this, in the years past, we communicated to that representative But then it's that representative, that ALC representative's responsibility to communicate that to the 80% of employees there, that those employees are not the fiscal court's responsibility. So that's why we have that policy in place. It's a lot better today, and so I think the communication is getting better to the state employees as far as what's going on and what has been going on. But I think that that's really important because a lot of people just don't know how that relationship is with the ALC and the fiscal court down to the judicial building. So when Brad communicates, I mean, he's done a lot of work on this, and there's been a lot of information that's been pushed out. I know when Russ was sending his reports, everything was communicated out, but there was a lag in communication on the other end, and they have improved that tremendously. So we hope to see some improvement as we move forward. But that's why we presented this, to give you guys an update. There is a financial piece to it, and Tim and Russ, Ted, I'm sorry, I appreciate.
Unbelievable.
I appreciate everything you guys are doing. You're giving us the information to where we can better make decisions. So I appreciate that.
And thanks for coming out. I know I called Mr. Odds yesterday and had a conversation with him, so I'm glad he was able to come. I also reached out to Summit. Jeff Goff, he's the owner of Summit. He wasn't able to be here today, but he's provided me with his email or his cell phone number, and he's actually reviewing the one they did in 2012. So if you wanted that number, if you wanted to reach out with him or even have him come to court and give an update, he'd be more than happy to do that. So I appreciate you guys coming today.
Thank you both. All right. We'll move on to item A under correspondence. I'm just going to read this to you. This is from Hope Clinic, Healthy Options for Preparing and Empowering. Dear folks, we here at the clinic have realized long ago that we are not alone in the work we do. You have been a real blessing to us through the years, and we greatly appreciate all you've done. And we are grateful. May God bless you, Hope Clinic staff and volunteers. And that was for the grant that they received. And if most folks aren't aware of Hope Clinic, definitely get involved and volunteer. If there's ever a time to fight for the unborn, now's the time. I personally think that the heartbeat bill is going to be challenged, and if as Christians, those that can't fight for themselves, the defenseless, are definitely our unborn. And so Hope Clinic does a lot of great things, and that's one of the initiatives that they stand behind. And as citizens, I feel like we need to stand behind that as well. Item B on the correspondence. I wanted to share this with everybody. This is Sharp Elementary School, Defenders of Freedom Memorial Brick Campaign. And you guys, have you guys got this? Here, slide that one around. This was actually the idea of Maddox Cope at Sharp Elementary. They had seen the Veterans Plaza at Mike Miller Park, so they want to do the same at Sharp Elementary. And this is a campaign that they're doing. They want to recognize veterans in our community. And I'm just going to read this. This is their flyer. This is Sharp Elementary School Defenders of Freedom Memorial Brick Campaign. Take advantage of this unique opportunity to commemorate members of your family and others who courageously protected our country, the United States of America, by participating in the Sharp Defenders of Freedom Memorial Brick Campaign. The campaign is a tribute to veterans who served in the military and individuals who provided support services keeping our country safe and free. The bricks will be placed around the flagpole in front of Sharp Elementary School. The brick campaign is presented by Maddox Cope as part of a passion project he has done at North Marshall Middle School. Contributions will be made to the Preston Cope Memorial Scholarship Fund. Bricks can be purchased and engraved with your honoree's name and affiliation. and each brick is just $30, and engraving is free. It's a 4-inch by 8-inch brick paver. It's got up to 3 lines, so you got 15 characters per line. And we'll put this out on the webpage so that folks can get a copy of this. We'll also have some copies in my office if they want to come by and fill this out. And I thought there was a deadline December 2nd, but I don't see it on here. But for those that are interested, this is the campaign, and I'll have the flyer put out there for everybody. All right. Old business, approve the minutes for November 12th meeting and November 15th special call meeting.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Ordinance 2019-10, the budget amendment, second reading.
Ordinance 2019-10, an ordinance relating to the annual budget and an amendment thereof, whereas the County of Marshall has received additional funds, now be it ordained by the Fiscal Court of Marshall County that Section 1, the annual budget for fiscal year 2019-2020 is amended to A, increase revenue accounts, the 911 grant fund, $200,366.81. General fund miscellaneous, $139,633.19, for a total increase in revenue of $340,000. B, increase expenditure accounts, the 911 fund grant equipment, $200,366.81. Fiscal Court capital projects, multipurpose building, $139,633.19. Total increased expenditure, $340,000. Section 2, the amounts added to the revenue and expenditure accounts in Section 1 are for governmental purposes, approved by the Marshall County Fiscal Court the 6th day of August, 2019, and this is the second reading.
This is the second reading. Is there any discussion? And if not, we would need a motion to approve the budget amendment, 2019-10.
Motion to approve the budget amendment.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Ordinance 2019-13, budget amendment, second reading.
An ordinance related to the annual budget and amendment thereof, whereas the County of Marshall has received additional funds, now be it ordained by the Fiscal Court of Marshall County that Section 1, the annual budget for fiscal year 2019-2020 is amended to A, increase revenue accounts, insurance proceeds, $32,180.99. State-funded paving projects, $356,683.84. Total increased revenue, $388,864.83. B, increase expenditure accounts, county insurance, $32,180.99. Road fund office equipment, $5,600. Road fund pipe culvert sewers, $50,000. Road department snow equipment, $20,000. Road fund equipment, $267,000. Road fund reserves, $14,083.84, for a total increased expenditure of $388,864.83. Section 2, the amounts added to the revenue expenditure accounts in Section 1 are for governmental purposes.
Is there any discussion on second reading of 2019-13? If not, we need a motion to approve the budget amendment.
Move we approve it.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Move on to new business. Before we get to new business, I meant to put this on here. I'm just going to give y'all an update. Wednesday at the PACROL meeting, I'm going to be presenting a grant application for $45,000, and that is for redundancy for internet out at Southwest 1. And so the IDA is actually having a meeting right now with utilities. They're having a utilities meeting, but if that is approved by PACRO, then they're going to start running additional fiber to the site. One is going to benefit the current Allied customer that's there that relies on internet, and then two, it'll definitely be a tool to promote the site for when Josh is out putting it in front of potential customers to show that we have that redundancy A great example is the '09 ice storm, when some of our businesses in the area lost total power and they had no internet. So a business that runs quite, I'd say, 80 or more % of their business is off of internet service. They desperately need that. So I'll let y'all know how that goes. I don't foresee any issues, but we'll be submitting that Wednesday. New business, the animal shelter donation account. There's about $30,000 in there. We sat down with the auditor about 2 weeks ago. The best way we see to fix this is just to run those monies into the general fund so that the treasurer can see those dollars. So we put this on here so that the court would take action just to move those dollars into the general funds. That way, as they come in, the treasurer's office will see those, and that will fix the audit. Basically, putting the fiscal court over that account doesn't fix the problem because the treasurer's office, when they don't come into the general funds, those dollars technically aren't seen. So that's what they recommended, and that's the easy way to fix it.
To add a little bit to that, I spoke, Micah with the state auditor's office, he's actually in-house, he has been for a couple of weeks doing the 2019 audit, and his associate John, and I spoke with John a little more yesterday after we talked, and he actually thinks that it might be best for it to have its own fund instead of going in the general fund. It just needs to be brought into our financials, into the fiscal court's financials, whether that's in the general fund or as its own fund. Currently, it's not reported with our fiscal court financials, and that's the goal of the reason that we've been having an issue on the audit. It needs to be in the fiscal court financials. So whether we do that in the general fund or its own fund, either way.
It needs to come through the fiscal court.
Yes.
What's that money been used for in the past, typically?
All kinds. I mean, they use it
Any
for
General operating, I mean, whether it be
paying the vets.
maintenance on the building,
Supplies.
Supplies.
food, yeah.
They have some vehicles, leases that they're paying out of that fund.
We just had I don't know if she was a resident, but we had a lady that left about several $1,000s to the animal shelter. So it's one of those situations where we don't want to turn away monies that people are wanting to give or donate, but it's just the right way to funnel those monies in.
So, yeah, to be clear, it's not like, what we hear about on the state level with lottery money going into the general fund and then who knows where. It does not
Correct.
go to what it is. We are simply saying, what you're looking for us is that reporting comes through the fiscal court versus what it has, or the
Right.
treasurer's office versus
We're going to
what
have to
it
have
has.
and we'll have to have a budget amendment once
Yeah.
I'll get a final total amount that will have to be amended into our budget. And I think that's part of the reason, as far as what you're kind of getting at, that John suggested it have its own fund, and
Yeah.
that's so that it doesn't get mixed up with other general
Yes.
funds or other funds to other, people donate because they want that money to go to specifically to the animal
Exactly.
shelter, and the way to keep that money separate is to have its own fund.
Okay.
And I just want to add, it's like hitting a moving target with auditors, because, here we just had the auditors on our 2018 say, do it this way, and then the state auditors are say doing it this way. To me, whatever we got to do to make sure that it's accountable and it's seen the right way, apparently having the fiscal court managing those dollars wasn't enough. So hopefully this will fix this issue. So they're like
From
attorneys.
15 years
actually.
of banking, I totally understand that. Yes.
So the decision would be for the court is, do you want that to stay in its account, but then it's managed by us? Is that right? Comes through, so that they get the.
Right, so I think the
'cause it's in-
option
it's
there
in-
is
it's-
to bring it into our financials, or it needs to be completely separate, as in, you guys shouldn't be on the board anymore. It's the understanding from the way that it's always come out on the audit. it needs to either be completely separate or it needs to come into our financials. The auditors lean towards it needs to be included in our financials since we have control over what's being paid. I'm the check signer, I write checks out of the account.
So if you want to make a motion that it comes into our financials, then we'll put it in the right manner that the auditors are stating.
Does it need, I mean, does the motion need to state that it is not going into our general funds, or is that self-explanatory? I mean, what's the,
That it can't be used for
yeah.
Yeah.
It's its own
Second account.
separate, it remains its own separate fund. Okay, so I'm moved that the animal shelter donation account financials run through the treasurer's office going forward, but remain in a separate
Fund.
fund.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Personnel.
There are a few personnel first, just a side note. First, I just want to thank Erica, just with her, what she's been trying to understand and learn since day one. As she's reading the budget amendment and she's trying to slide it over to me to read, and I slide it back to her to read it. She's had to learn, I mean, basically from day one, public accounting, which is totally different from where she came from. So I just wanted to commend her for her efforts in trying to figure all this out. Now also with the auditors here, they're asking her questions, and so she's trying to go through that. So she's doing a great job, and the learning curve was a lot, but she's getting there, and I'm just impressed with her. So I just wanted to thank her in public here to let her know she's doing a great job. Couple personnel.
And she's bashful.
Yeah, she doesn't, she's like, I didn't, when she was hired, I guess Judge didn't tell her she'd have to speak and, yeah. I was like, no, you gotta read these, so.
Man, that committee did a great job.
Yeah, didn't they?
I don't know who was on that, but.
I'll go through.
Some things we left out. Right?
Yeah, that was a big, I didn't know I had to do that. I'm like, oh, you gotta speak in this.
That was a long.
So there's a couple personnel changes. I'll go through these first. This is October 2019 personnel changes. Tim Reynolds, Sheriff's Office, rank pay increase from $2 to $4, effective 10/1/19. Dan Duke, County Clerk's Office, wage increase from $25 to $30 per. Tim York, effective 10/4/19. Larry Simmons, Deputy Jailer, full-time new hire at $20.19 per hour, effective 10/11/19. Adam Barger, Deputy Sheriff, full-time new hire at $19 per hour, 10/16/19. Robert Mack, Animal Care and Control, part-time new hire, $10.55 per hour, effective 10/19/19. Adam Norwood, Court Security, part-time new hire at $9 per hour at 10/18/19. Lindsay Faith, Treasurer's Office, part-time new hire at $12 per hour, 10/28/19. Caitlin Jones, Deputy Jailer, part-time new hire at $13 per hour at effective 9/27/19. So those are just for your information. Question?
And, well, I'm just thinking, then they're all within
Budget.
budget.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Now, these are different. These are, and I'll do these I can do this as one motion, or if there's discussion on individual ones, then we'll have to kind of go back. But these are 4 wage increases. First one is for Morgan LeMaster at the Park, Administrative Assistant. Wage increase effective 11/1/19 to $12.15 per hour to $13.75 per hour. That's within the pay range and within her skill set she's developed since she started. The next one is for Brittany Heath, Parks Director. Wage increase effective 11/1/19 from $43,031.25 per hour to $49,608. I'm sorry, per hour. That wasn't per hour, per year. Whew, that'd be a big one, wouldn't it? That is also within range of her Department 2 category and her skill set and what she's done since she's been hired. The other ones are for Alexandra Belcher, dispatcher at 911. Wage increase from $13.43 to $14 per hour. She went through the certification and has been a really good dispatcher for 911. The last one is for Nicole Ford, Administrative Assistant at the Road Department. This is a wage increase from $14.96 to $17.96. This increase is for cleaning the building. Mr. Nanny previously cleaned the building, and Nicole's going to take over that responsibility. So that's part of that budget and coming out of from what his pay increase was.
Any of those individually go outside the
Yes.
budget? Okay.
Yep.
All four?
The two parks do, 911 does not, and neither does the road. So with the two parks, we have talked to the Parks Director, and we anticipate an increase in some of the things that she's implemented to cover for those increases. But what we're going to do, as I was telling Judge Neal this morning, we'll let those line items go through the end of the fiscal year, and as they become closer to what they're budgeted, sometimes we over budget in health insurance that, over 15,000, it's easier to move those over. But we're confident with what the Parks Director's done to the increased revenue that she's implemented since she's been there, that'll far cover these two raises. So really, it's just action on those 4 wage increases that the court would need to decide on. Not yet, because it's negatively affected that line item yet.
Any discussion? If not, we would need a motion for the personnel changes on the pay increase.
Move we approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Item C, Treasurer's Training Incentive.
That's me again. Okay, previously, Emily has always participated in the treasurer's training incentive. It's based on the same as the elected officials training, and so I'm just kind of seeking approval to pursue that as well. It is budgeted already. You guys did approve it in the budget this year.
What this is the House Bill 810 training incentives that we get. What they do is they allow the treasurer, what's been done is we've allowed the treasurer to participate. Obviously, they can't participate in the 810, but we budget those dollars. She goes to the same training. They have the treasurer's conference, and I think next year is the actual treasurer's budget training. But then she just fills out the same papers, brings them back to us, shows that she's got the 40 hours of training, and then we approve the dollars for the training just as we do. So this is done more at the local level so that she maintains her training. As you guys know, as the laws change and how it affects us from a budgetary standpoint, we definitely want our treasurer to be up on to date with the changes in training. But that would be an action by the Fiscal Court to approve that. And it is budgeted.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Appropriations transfer.
You guys have copies of this. These are all intra-fund transfers, very similar to what we do every month. There is an amount on there to transfer for the transient tax. Unfortunately, my computer has decided to lock up. Let's see. Your all's tablets are probably locked up as well. I feel like it's $30,000-ish dollars. Do you have a printout copy? Can I borrow that? Yeah. When technology fails you, you have to go back to paper.
No, you
It's
just quit.
$22,431.11 that needs to be transferred to transient tax to the tourism department. So I need a motion from you guys to do that, as well as the appropriation transfers.
Pass them over just so, because all of our.
The intra-fund transfer is related. It's the next thing on the list on the agenda. And that is to transfer occupational tax funds from the occupational tax bank account to the general fund. That is also budgeted. It's just the actual physical transferring of the money.
Move we approve.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And the appropriations transfer? Let's do them individually. So Monty, was yours the
Appropriation
appropriations?
transfer, yeah.
We would need one for the intra-fund transfer.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Payment of the bills.
Motion to pay the bills.
Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to adjourn. Yeah, go ahead.
Inauguration Day. Sometimes in the past, that's been designated as a state holiday.
No, December 3rd is what's our list? Do you have one of the computers? We've got our designated dates that we put out. Yeah.
I haven't seen any.
I know we didn't do it in,
But it's a possibility, so.
yeah. I know we didn't do it in 2015.
Is it Tuesday?
I haven't heard anything. I haven't received anything. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
All those is there a second?
Yes.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.